If you've ever found yourself feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, or even helpless with your child's academic struggles, then you don't want to miss today's podcast episode. Hi, I'm Emily Hamblin, mom of four and certified teacher. I'm also neurodivergent, as are several of my children, so academic struggles are something we've faced a lot in our family. And here's something that I know. If you want to help your child have academic success, whatever you define that as, it needs to start with a healthy mindset, with helpful thoughts. So that's what we're delving into today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Enlightening Motherhood podcast. I am so excited for today's guest, Scotti Weintraub. Scotti is an academic success coach, and we are going to dig into reframing the way that parents think about their children's academics in ways that's really going to serve both the parent and the child. Welcome, Scotti.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Emily.
Scotti, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us just a little bit about how you've come to be where you are today and what it is that you do.
Of course, as, as you just said, I'm an academic success coach, which means that I help parents figure out how to support their kids in school, especially when things are not going so well. And I started doing this because when my own kids struggled in school, I felt so alone and I didn't know who to ask questions. I didn't know what I could do, what was
Mm.
available to me. And I really struggled for a long time trying to figure it out on my own. And so my goal with my business, Reframe Parenting, is to help other parents have a smoother road than I had.
That is fantastic. I love this so much. And I love the values and the perspectives that you have as you help parents, which we will dive into today. So, today we're not getting into that nitty gritty of like how to communicate with the school and what academic success looks like, because in order for any of that to be helpful, first we need to make sure that we're having thoughts or a mindset that's actually helpful. What are some common thoughts or opinions or beliefs that you see parents have that are kind of hindering their ability to help their child with academics? So, say their child is struggling academically,
Hmm.
and the parent, what kind of beliefs might they have, even though they're doing their best, of course? But what beliefs might they have that are maybe holding them back from truly helping their child in academics?
Well, one that I find is, and I like to just tell parents, like, we are not our kids. And I don't mean that with any kind of negativity. It's just reality that our kids are individual people with
Mm.
individual needs, and their brains work in different ways potentially than ours do. And so sometimes if what we remember from our own academic time can really hold us back in being able to see who our kid really is. Because if, for instance, I mean, I was a pretty good student, and so if that's the lens that I'm using to apply to my child who is neurodivergent, this is like my real example here,
Yes.
then it's really hard for me to see what their needs are because I think, well, I could turn my homework in on time. Why can't they?
Mm.
It kind of puts us in this stuck place. So we're not able to have empathy or expand sort of our thinking about what might be really happening if we get too caught up in, well, my experience was this, or I would have dealt with it in this way. Because really, our kids are unique people.
Mm. That one is so true. I feel like this is a general parenting thing
Yeah,
too.
it could be, yes.
I
Yes.
I had most likely undiagnosed ADHD as a student, and so now it makes sense. All the homework that I would do, and it would stay in my backpack, and I wouldn't turn it in,
Hmm.
and I would get the zero even though I did it, or that I just forgot about and never did at all, right? When my kids do the same, I'm like, oh, I get you, I hear you. But then
Yeah.
there's other areas of parenting where I'm like, okay, I would have never done that as a child.
Yeah.
Like
It's hard for us
losing
to
a
wrap
board
our
game.
brain around it.
I never, like I was fine to lose a board game. I'm just not a competitive person. Like, and when my kids were raging and like flipping the board game in the air and throwing chairs over, and I was like, I would have never done that as a child, so.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
when we get stuck in that I would never part,
Mhm.
it just closes us off to
Yes.
being able to not just see our kids, but also empathize.
Hmm.
Because if we just see our own experience, and I'm glad that you now have some clarity on what your experience was, and I hear this a lot from parents too, who find out their own neurodivergence by
Yes.
through the process of figuring out their
Yes.
child's. But it brings up another point that sometimes hinders people is this not having enough information
Yeah.
about our kids, right?
Mm.
If we don't know like how their brain works best, we can't best support them in academics or really in a lot of other ways too.
Mm.
That if we have that information, and sometimes parents are hesitant because they worry, and I get this, but you worry about a label or is this
Yeah.
going to hold my child back to know that they have ADHD, for instance, especially in an academic setting?
Mm.
Is that going to hold them back? But your example of now being able to reflect back on your own experience as a student shows that actually, if you'd have had that information when you were a student, how might your experience have been different, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could talk for an hour on that
I
probably, or
know that's a
six.
whole other
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And along this vein, I love this, Scotty, your example of I would have turned in my homework. Why didn't you? And maybe your kid has a neurodivergent diagnosis, maybe they don't. I don't honestly think it matters. I love your point, just recognizing that your child's not you. Yes, even if they're biologically yours, I know we have a lot of parents with adopted children, a lot with biological kids, but even if they do have your genetics, they're still not you.
Right.
And so
And
that's,
their brain could work completely differently than yours does.
yeah. Yeah. And what's hard too with me is I have a kid who I feel like we're really similar. So in the areas that we're not, I'm like, "Oh, but I thought that we were I thought we were so similar and now we're not." So I love that. Along that vein, I want to stick with this example of not turning your homework in. Do you find that a lot of parents think the kids are doing it on purpose?
I think some, yes. But I think it's also just we kind of revert back. And sometimes this also comes from teachers, right? We revert back to those sort
Mhm.
of stereotypes that they're just messy, they're lazy,
Yeah.
they are unorganized. And what I try to talk to parents a lot about is that I mean, I named my business Reframe Parenting for a reason. That if we look at it in a slightly different way, it opens up opportunity and conversation rather than shutting it down. So in this situation, we say, well, are they really lazy or do they just not have the skills yet?
Mhm.
Have they not developed a system for dealing with their homework?
Mm.
Maybe I, as a parent, need to be checking in. Let's go do, go through your backpack once a week and look at what's in there, what you need to keep, what do you need to recycle, what is coming up. Maybe they just need more of that scaffolding. And so that's a very different lens to look at the situation than saying they're lazy, which is
Mhm.
so, judgment filled
It is. And
and not positive.
even more than the I mean the judgment filled part is of course we don't want that. But even more, it like closes that door. Oh, my
Hmm.
kid's just lazy. Boom.
Yep. That's just who they are.
As opposed to, oh, they haven't yet learned a system to help them do their homework on time. Oh, wow. Now that door's open. Now we have a clear, like, this gives us a lot of wiggle room for improvement.
Yeah, and it's I think sort of empowering to be like, "Oh, okay, there's something I can do here."
Yes.
It sort of opens up your mind to what can be done instead of just closing it with what can't be done.
Yes.
So,
So
and
good.
especially with regards to, systems and homework and executive functioning,
Hmm.
there my favorite executive functioning coach always says that it's a skill and you can build it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
if you
good.
know that, you're like, oh, okay, this is something we can work on.
Oh, I love that. Because we hear, especially with ADHD or with autism, which is what several of my children have, oh, they just have low executive function. And then you go, well, they start out with low executive function.
Right. It might be
Okay.
where they're at now,
Yeah,
and that's
they can learn
okay,
it. They can
but
learn
they
it.
can learn it. I
Oh,
mean, the way their brain processes information won't change, but how, the systems you put in place around them,
yes.
the tools they learn, those are things that, they can carry through their lifetime.
Mm. So good. So good. And hearing you talk about, oh, let's go through your backpack once a week. A big shift in my parenting has been from like making my kids do their homework or making sure they do it to helping them with it. In terms of thinking of my 13-year-old, if I were to say to him, okay, you missed a homework assignment again. I'm going to go through your backpack once a week and make sure you don't have assignments in there. We're done. We're done. That's the end of that conversation. He has, even if I do go through his backpack, he's shut off. It's our
Yeah.
relationship at that point in time. He's like, he's checked out mentally. But
Hmm.
if I were to say to him, hey, I hear you, like I've forgotten homework assignments in the past too. Or maybe you never forgot a homework assignment. I'm sure you forgot something. And so
Right.
I've forgotten things in the past too. Would it help you if I go through your backpack with you once a week? Would that be something that would help you? And most likely your kid wants to do well too. And so I could see my 13-year-old saying, well, right now we're at like the cool stage. So be like,
Well,
yeah. Which to me would mean, oh, yes, that would be very helpful.
well, yes, because you know your child, right? We all know our child better than anyone else in the world knows them. So, working with them, this is just such a great example you gave that forcing them might not be the right approach because it might just shut down those
Yeah.
conversations. But then it's an option if you say, would this help? And he could say, oh, I don't know. And you could say, well, what do you think might help? And then it's again like opening up conversations. And it might not, the first time you try it might not be the right. You might realize like, oh, this isn't exactly what we needed, but then you can change it up, right? It's just keeping those lines of communication open and finding what best suits their needs rather than just coming in with an authoritative voice and
Mhm.
saying, this is what we're going to do.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, so our own thoughts, the way we approach our kids' challenges, we've talked about some more helpful mindsets there. What about whenever we
Mhm.
need to go to the school? What are some unhelpful thoughts or some limiting beliefs that parents have when they go to communicate with the school that you've seen?
Mm. Well, I think one limiting thought might be that parents don't understand that they need to get involved.
Mm,
And it's really easy because we are not in the school setting, right? We send our kids off to school and we kind of, cross all our fingers and hope for the best. Because we're not getting information about how every day goes. We're not and that can make us feel like we have no role to play, that we're just, the teachers are experts and they are. But they don't know your child best. And if
mm,
you've done that work of like really figuring out how your child learns best, how their brain works, then you have a lot of insight that you can share. So, assuming that you have no role to play, I think is one limiting belief. The other is that your role, and other, there are probably more, but that you as the parent are there to be the heavy, to be the person who's like, this is what's going to happen. And as we know, in any kind of relationship, inside or outside of school, collaboration is always going to get you further than, ramming forward with an agenda.
yeah.
So I like to encourage families to lead with curiosity. So the
Mm,
goal is to gather more information, to ask questions instead of making demands or shutting down conversations. So the phrase that I like to use is I wonder, because it just sort of leaves a lot to be discovered, right? I wonder why he's having a hard time turning in his assignments.
oh, this is so good. This is what I needed. Years ago, one of my kids had homework recess taken away because
Mm,
they didn't do their homework or class something. And I remember just feeling so much anger and frustration. Like,
hmm.
okay, I need to call that teacher and make sure she never takes away his recess. And I don't know about you, but if I were a teacher and a parent contacted me like that, especially before I learned everything I know now about emotional regulation, I would have been like, hold on, I'm the teacher here. What do you think you're doing? You're not in the
Yep.
classroom. You don't know what's going on. And so just contacting the teacher with more of a, hmm, I wonder why my kid's recess was taken away.
Yeah. And
It just opens
and
it.
even further than why it happened, but like, why was he not able to get his work done?
Mm,
Right? Because then you're really addressing the root cause of whatever the challenge is. And you're not just coming at it from, addressing the reaction
yeah, I
to
love
that.
this.
So the reaction is that they didn't get their work done. But why didn't they get their work done? Did they run out of time? Did they not really understand the assignment? There could be a bunch of reasons, but if we just only focus on the no recess, which I agree with you, all kids need to get
Yeah,
their
yeah.
energy out. That's not my preferred strategy. But if we kind of identify it, then we wouldn't have to worry about the recess, right?
Mm. That's so good. And I love this idea also of leading with curiosity rather than judgment with our kids. They fail a test instead of, how could you fail that test? We studied every night and
Hmm.
whatever. Instead of just, oh, I wonder why you failed that test.
What was so challenging about it? Were there pieces you didn't understand? Then you can sort of identify like, oh, I really didn't, understand. We've been struggling in algebra in my house
Mhm.
lately. So math, I didn't understand this graphing.
Mm,
That part just didn't make sense to me. Okay, we can work with that, right?
yes.
That's like a specific thing that we can go to the teacher and say, hey, my son just really didn't understand this one piece. Could we find a way to help him figure that out in preparation for the next test or whatever that looks like? But it just gives us more information.
That's so good. And as we lead with, I mean, it feels better to me. It feels better when my child comes to me to lead more with that curiosity. I'm able to tap into that compassion because I know everyone watching and listening to this loves their child. Like
Of
there's no
course.
question on that. But sometimes when we're judging why, like, how could you do this? It's hard to like feel it in that moment. Does it make sense? And so when we lead with that curiosity, it just opens it up like, oh, you probably didn't like having to miss recess either. You probably don't like the fact that you're failing either. And if they
Right.
really don't care about the failing, no matter what you do, it's not going to make them learn. So, you need to, I wonder why you don't care. Like,
Right.
let
That's
me
an
just,
interesting question because sometimes, kids and adults, we cover up our emotions with other emotions.
mm,
So that I don't care, is that really that you don't care or that you're feeling ashamed or frustrated or embarrassed or, it
yeah,
just, if
yes,
we open up the way that we think about it, it allows us as parents too, as you said, like we don't have to come at it with this hard, sort of, you were talking about regulation. We don't have to be dysregulated in the moment
yeah.
about those things. And that doesn't mean we're not taking it seriously. Because I think sometimes we equate sternness with whether or not we are actually paying attention or taking care of things. And it doesn't have to be that way.
This is so good. Yes, major shift when I stopped thinking that let me see how I want to phrase this. Actually, for me as a teacher and as a parent, was when I realized if me as the teacher, if I'm owning their grades, I'm taking their grades personally, I'm concerned about how they're doing academically, it's almost like it lets the kid off the hook. And I did that both as a teacher and as a parent. And when I went, you know what, this is up to you. I'm here to support you, I'm here to guide you. And I stopped making sure my kid did their work and started helping them do their work. It
Hmm.
really, it really made a huge shift. And now my kid feels ownership. My kids feel ownership for their own learning. Instead of me owning their learning, it's them owning it, and I'm just the guide.
Yeah. Oh, I love that because ultimately, what's our big goal as parents? Our big goal is to raise them to be healthy, happy, successful adults, whatever success looks like. And I'm not not prescribing what that looks like, but that's our big overarching goal. So if we can, kind of keep that in mind along the way, all the little stuff becomes little, the
Mm,
things that come up,
yeah.
they're not, they don't have to be huge mountains. They can be
Mm,
little hills, that we have to cross. And it takes some of the weight off.
yes. Oh, that's so good. So good. Okay, now you've talked before about having kind of a strengths-based lens when we think of our
Hmm.
children's struggles, that we actually start with their strengths. That sounds a little weird at first, so can you explain that a bit?
Well, I like to talk about like how we can see our kids in the most positive light, even when they're struggling, right? Because we also know that they have really amazing good things about them.
Yes.
And when they are having a hard time, especially in an academic setting, they get so much negativity.
Yes.
There is, they get negative feedback after negative feedback after negative feedback. And then what can happen is the negative self talk. I mean, how many times do you have to hear you're lazy to then start saying, I guess I'm just lazy,
Yeah.
right? And that doesn't feel good. Nobody wants to feel that way.
No.
So, how can we look at their challenges as strengths? So, let's go back to our homework analogy here. Maybe they, what we would say is, oh, they're just not turning in their work in time, they're disorganized. Well, how can we think about where's a strength that lies in the middle of that?
Mm.
What we also know, if you've kind of figured some things out about your kid, well, maybe they really excel with schedules. Schedules work really well for them.
Mm.
That's a strength, right? To know what uh, specific strategy works best for you and how you can be successful is a huge strength.
Yes.
So if we just focus on the negative part about it, we miss the positive part of, okay, what we know about them is that when they have these strategies in place, these tools, they can succeed. That is a huge strength. So it takes a little bit of like maneuvering your brain, but I challenge everyone listening to just think about what's one thing that you would see as a challenge with your child, and how could you think about it in an entirely different way and find a strength inside that
Mm.
challenge. It might not be easy, I get it, but I challenge you to because I think it just again like moves our brains enough that we can see, oh, okay, here's the success piece within the challenge or or the
Yes.
road to that success.
Mhm.
Or a tool to that success.
Oh, that's great. So a child maybe that's struggling in algebra, struggling in
Hmm.
academics, right? I mean, in math, that perhaps, we see that they're not giving up, that they're still going to the class,
Yeah.
they're still trying. That's grit. That's resilience. What an incredible skill. We
Perseverance.
need more people with
Yep.
perseverance. Yes.
They keep going, they keep trying new things. Trying new things is a huge strength.
Yes. I honestly
So,
think a lot of my own strengths today were because it was really hard for me to get through school. Like, I didn't
mhm,
realize how hard I was working until, you know, as an afterthought.
yeah.
But
Well,
goodness,
but if
yeah,
you as a parent can see that in your kid and say, "Hey, I recognize that this is challenging for you, and you keep showing up," that's awesome.
yeah,
I mean, imagine how much better that would feel
yeah.
to anyone, especially a kid
Mm,
who is used to hearing like, "Oh, why are you not getting this? Why can you not understand this graphing? We've gone
mm.
over it 5 times."
That's so
And
good.
instead say, "I see you trying really hard, and that is a wonderful thing to do. And that is a skill that I value."
I love that. This is something I've been doing a lot in my parenting lately to try to find a specific thing that my child does and then make a
Mm,
general statement of why they're a good person or a general characteristic that's going to help them in life. So I love this. Hey, I know it's really hard for you to pay attention in English class. And I also know that you keep trying to find new ways to pay attention. That is because you're a creative person. You don't stop whenever you meet a challenge and you keep trying to find new ways to address that challenge. This is an awesome skill that's going to serve you in life.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is so good. Good. So, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts that parents can do as they're working to get ready to help their child, whether their kid is homeschooled, whether their kid is in a public or charter or non-traditional school? What advice would you have to reframe the way that they're considering the academic struggles?
Well, I think that ultimately academic struggles or academics in general are just one piece of that successful life.
Mm,
So while I know it feels challenging in the moment, we have to also kind of keep that big picture in mind of what our goals are and maybe find places outside of academics where your child shines and really lean into those too so that they can have positive experiences so it
mm.
isn't all feeling hard, right? If your kid thrives in theater or in sports or loves going to camp or whatever it is, those are places too where we can lean into those really positive experiences to help kind of take some of the weight off of school challenges. So they have places where they thrive. That feels really good. No one wants to feel like they're struggling everywhere.
Yeah.
That does not feel good for anyone. So, where are those places that you see your kid really shining, and how can you get more of that? Because it just allows them to be more confident. I mean, when my older son struggled in school for a long time, he loved summer camp. And I'm a big fan of summer camp because I think it does a lot of really great things for kids. But I would see him come home from camp, and it was like he walked a little taller.
Mm.
You know, that experience of being successful all the time and no one telling you to sit still or be quiet or do things in a very specific way. Just let him be his best self,
Oh, I love
even
that.
for that little bit of time.
I love
You know, it
that.
just sort of buoys them.
Yeah.
So just find those places where your kid thrives. It might not be in academics, and that's okay, but we need to maximize their those opportunities for them to find success.
Oh, I love that. This is so fantastic. Okay,
Oh,
Scotty.
thank you.
Everyone's going to want to connect with you. Where can they find
Okay. They can find me. My website is reframeparenting.com. And on there, I have a school struggle checklist that you can sign up for. It's a few questions to ask yourself to really determine, is this something I should be really paying attention to now, or is it something I can put on the back burner? And that will also get you on my email list so you can keep hearing about what I'm up to. I work one on one with parents to help them strategize and come up with plans to really help their kids succeed, whatever that looks like in school.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll include those links in the show notes. Thank you for joining us
Th-
today, Scotty.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, I especially hope that this is going to help you and your child in your parenting journey. Those of you in the Neurodivergent Survival Kit and Emotionally Healthy Families membership, remember we do have a masterclass coming up on academic success for neurodivergent kids. It's going to be amazing. It's probably going to end up being a little mini course for you to go through. If you're not yet in the Neurodivergent Survival Kit, of course, you can always come and join the waitlist to know when doors are open again. You can get there by going to emily-hamblin.com/kit. And of course, that link is in the show notes. Thank you so much again for listening. You're amazing. Keep going, especially on the hard days. Your efforts matter. Bye.